Good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful conversations, and you're going to hear even more. Thank you so much for coming, everybody. My name is Linda Orsoletto. I am the City Club Board President for the next 2 months, and then we'll have somebody else take over. So thank you so very much for coming today. I just wanted to mention that today's forum goes until 1:30, so we have time to answer and ask many, many more questions. First, before I get into our sponsors, I would like to thank our firefighters who are really helping us out with what's happening. Yes, and not only that, is remembering all the lives we lost 23 years ago today. So our organization would not be sustaining without the sponsors that we have. So I'd like to give a particular gratitude to our platinum sponsors, many of which you see up here on the screen. And our platinum and gold sponsors are ASI Wealth Management, the City of Bend, yes, please. Central Oregon Community College, the High Desert Pine Group at Morgan Stanley, Oregon State University Cascades, St. Charles Health Systems, Central Oregon Association of Realtors, and Brooks Resources. And then special recognition today for our presenting sponsors, Hayden Homes, thank you, and Mid-Oregon Credit Union, from what I know, like the second year in a row, so thank you for doing that. And then also our supporting sponsor, Pinnacle Architecture. And you can find a full list of sponsors on our website, and they are so very, very critical to keeping the lights on, subsidizing the meals, paying for the venue. So we really do depend upon sponsors. So thank you so very much. And before we get started today, I want to introduce you to Jacob Fain. He is past president and the current treasurer for City Club. He's going to say a few things more about the organization.
Thanks, Linda. Thanks, everybody, for being here today, attending one of our most popular forums, the City Managers Forum, always one of my favorites as well. Last month, as some of you know, we kicked off our inaugural annual giving campaign, which I appreciate is something that's actually new for City Club. Now, City Club is a nonprofit that has primarily been supported by sponsors, as Linda was saying, and memberships for a very long time. And I just wanted to share a few minutes today why I choose to support City Club. I think, like many of the people in here, I believe that City Club is a very special part of our community. I mean, how many opportunities do we have to learn from experts on some of the topics that are really affecting Central Oregon and the region? But not only just learning from the experts, but having the opportunity to interact with them, to meet fellow community members and talk to them as well. And the diversity of people who are in this room and who show up to City Club month after month. I just say, take a look around the room and you're gonna see people from all walks of life. You're gonna see students, retirees. You're gonna see business owners. You're gonna see telecommuters. Our elected officials are here today. Republicans, Democrats, independents. This is one of the few places where I think we have the opportunity to really exchange ideas with people who may not be like us, and it may be, for some of us, the only thing that we have in common is the fact that we're here today. So I get it, there's a lot of nonprofits in this community, City Club being one of them. And all of us have probably paid something to be here today. We either paid for our membership, we paid as a sponsor, we were paid for our lunch. And so here I am asking people for more money. For the past 6 years, I've served on the finance committee. For the past 2 years, I've served as treasurer, and I've had the opportunity to really get to know the finances of City Club. And for the longest time, City Club has been that two-legged stool that I talked about, being member and sponsor supported, which is such a key part of the mission and part of the organization. But what has always been missing is individual giving. And a couple of years ago, my wife and I, we decided that, hey, we're gonna start becoming annual sponsors of the work that City Club does. And for the first time, we're asking all of you and the rest of the community to think about ways that you can provide financial support for City Club, just like we do. And so I am here today to let you know that City Club benefits from the support of individual donors and individual gifts from people like you, and I encourage you to make a gift. Just like I do, I know so many people in this room value the work that City Club does, values the opportunity to hear from experts, to engage with experts on the topics that face our community, that have the opportunity to meet with people from different walks of life and engage in different conversations with people you may not normally engage with. I think that is incredibly valuable, and I know so many of you in here do as well. And so I ask you to join me in supporting City Club. Whether it's making a gift of $25, $2,500, you can be generous. But whatever's meaningful to you, I ask you to consider making that gift. We've tried to make it easy for everybody. There are pledge slips on every table. They're the green forms in the middle. You can fill that out, hand it to one of the volunteers as you leave. There's a QR code that you can scan, make a gift online. But this is a crucial part of fulfilling City Club's mission, and we really would rely on the support and generosity of you, our members, our supporters, the people who find value in what we bring to the Central Oregon community month after month through our forums. So with that, I thank you for your generosity. I thank you for your support. I thank you for being here today. And with that, we are going to kick off our forum. Our moderator for today's forum is someone we all know, Tammy Baney, the Executive Director of the Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, COIC, our region's Council of Governments. Prior to joining COIC, Tammy served 12 years in elected office as a Deschutes County Commissioner. In her free time, Tammy serves as a board member with the Central Oregon Film Office and as chair of the Central Oregon Health Council, Habitat for Humanity of Oregon, and SAFE, Oregon's not-for-profit workers' comp insurance company. She's a past foster parent, a founding member of the Family Access Network Foundation, and she is a fierce competitor in the LaPine lawnmower races. I think there's a video later, so stick around.
Thank you. Okay, so, and this year I was not able to race, so where's Kathy DeBone? I know. Next year you're going down, I know. Okay, so, and let me tell you about a great time. LaPine lawnmower races, it is as home-cooked as you could ever imagine. So thank you, and I do want to start with that today does mark the 23rd anniversary of September 11th, 2001. A really tragic day in our history, and it feels sort of serendipitous of us being here today to also talk about government, local government, and the engagement and the impact, and how do you respond? Obviously, that is something that, for us, we talk a lot about the Cascadia. We are going to be the community and the region that is going to have to respond to our own very large natural event, natural disaster at some point. But I wanted to just start with a quote, an anonymous quote that means a lot to me today, which is the legacy of 9/11 is not just one of loss, but also one of hope and unity. And so my hope for today is that we come together with a better understanding of what local government does, what city managers do. We talk a lot about elections and who we are electing and what that person stands for, and that is wonderful. But there is a person behind that that is helping with a large team, or sometimes not, trying to fulfill those obligations and those commitments that our elected officials are making to each and every one of you. And so what does that look like? What is that mental gymnastics that happens in terms of those relationships, and how do they get that job done? And so the last time that we met at City Club, we were talking, it was April of 2023, and we had just had the Oregon Values and Beliefs survey where over 3,000 comments were received about what people really care about in this region. And they talked about the importance of their personal finances and the impact of housing, and the impact of affordable housing. Did I mention housing? Okay. Drought and water supply. Thank you, Mother Nature, for the rain today. Not sure who made that call, but thank you. And our homelessness crisis. And I'd love to say over the last year, we've made great strides in each of those. Now we have affordable housing, we've addressed the unhoused crisis, and we are, have the droughts taken care of, and wildfires are not an issue, but that's not where we are today. And so, we are a community that comes together, though, and unifies when we have challenges. And so I would like to, before I introduce our folks, I want to just mention to Keith Witcosky that this is in alphabetical order according to city. So I know there's a little competitiveness among all of you. So as I introduce you, I would love for, and I have a jar here as well, and so that is, one of the things that I've heard about this forum is that we love the banter. We love the banter between this group of individuals who are doing the hard work, and the fact that they can make it fun on occasion too. So if you happen to say something that's maybe a little edgy to one another, whatever's captured we'll use for a little coffee fun, shall we say. And then, so after, all right, so come on up. I'd like to introduce Bend City Manager Eric King, LaPine City Manager Geoff Wullschlager, Madras City Administrator Will Ibershof, and Prineville City Manager Steve Forrester. Come on down, it's like a game show. Redmond City Manager Keith Witcosky, and last but not least, Sisters City Manager Jordan Wheeler. Okay, go ahead. Do we have enough chairs? Okay, perfect. I'm going to sit here, so I apologize for those if my back is to you. We are going to have a conversation, which is instead of just a Q&A, so I want to be able to read their body language a little bit and be able to see you, and then you can see each other. And so I want to start.
Tammy, I brought the sign for Keith in case he needs it.
Excellent. See, we're kicking it off just right. Perfect. Okay, so feel free, and I'm going to start with, it is not lost on me that I am the only woman up here. So I'm going to, there we go. So there's money in the jar. Okay, so let's just start there, shall we? Okay. So the relationship between a council that changes, we have elections, and the role of the city manager. The council sets out priorities, and then you head off out into the wilderness to try to achieve that success. Eric, would you kick us off with a little bit in terms of just your thoughts on how that interaction and that synergy works behind the scenes?
Well, it was a pretty important night last night for city managers. We were mentioned in the debate. Did anybody catch that? The Springfield, somebody in this room put a Reddit post. They made up a story about Bend, and I was quoted in it as saying, all the pets in Bend are safe. So
Thank you for that.
So that's kind of what we do.
Excellent,
right?
wonderful. Okay, so that's a mic drop moment.
Right. It was so fun on LinkedIn. People are like, finally, city managers are getting a shout out. Like, we are usually the people behind the scenes, and as Tammy mentioned, we implement the policy. Council sets, the elected body that represent you all set policy. One of our core jobs is to make sure that that policy is being implemented, it's being resourced. I would say there's some other things too that we do. We manage the day-to-day operations of the city. So think of the things below the water line, police calls for service, making sure our water and sewer, you flush the toilet and it works, that we process building permits, all those things, we make sure that we do with the team through a performance management system, strategic plans, all the things that you would do in any organization. We also work amongst our partners in the region, with our fellow city managers, with you all as nonprofits, as businesses. That's another core tenet of our job. And then I would also say put kind of that ombudsman in the portfolio as well. We often kind of problems roll up to us. So if there's something that's not resolved, maybe at with somebody's interacting with the city, typically we have to get in and problem solve. So that's a real rough outline of the major job.
Excellent. So let's talk about the interaction between the cities and the county. There are things that the cities don't do. So the city doesn't have its own jail. The city does not have its own land use facility. The city does not have its own public health or behavioral health department. Tell us a little bit. I'm not sure who wants to take it, and I do know that Nick Lilac is in the room, so if you're into shoots, be careful. But how is that interaction between the county and the work that you do in terms of being able to achieve success for your communities?
I think it's critical from three fronts. One, you have to be able to influence a directed outcome. So say, for example, your council really wants to do X with public health, but public health is doing Y. So you want to be able to interact with that county executive to work on trying to sway them and ultimately public health to your X versus their Y. The other big thing is that you need that relationship if you decide to move forward with a project, because sometimes cities, candidly, a lot of times, they don't have enough money to do it, so they look to the county to help partner them financially with it. The third aspect of it is you look for ways where you can create a united win. So in Jefferson County, for example, we have not had an economic development director from EDCO in many, many years, and now we do. And Madras couldn't afford it on its own. The county couldn't afford it on its own. Either could Metolius or Culver. So we all combined our resources together, and now we have somebody starting here October 1st. So it's a multifaceted component, but the biggest one is influence.
I think that's critical. Jordan, go.
I think one thing that we get questions about, and maybe something to make the distinction, is that there's more than just cities when you're talking about local government, right? And you mentioned the county and the services that counties provide, but there's a lot of special districts too that also may have a board and an executive director. And smaller cities in particular often rely upon those other special districts to provide recreation services. In the case of Sisters, we have the Sisters Park and Recreation District. Fire districts are another one. So big cities, they may have their own fire department, their own police department. Of course, utilities is a big core function of what cities do, but we rely upon a lot of special districts. And so one of the relationships that we have with the county is the sheriff's office. So we contract with the sheriff's office to provide, the public safety services, which works out pretty well because it actually saves us a lot of money. You would have to buy a bunch of police cars and build a police station, a court system and all that. We can just buy into a pre-existing public safety office with Deschutes County Sheriff.
Great point.
I just wanted to add to that, and this is not a ubiquitous comment across the whole state of Oregon, but I think one could argue, especially given my experience in rural Oregon, the further away a municipality is from the county seat, the stronger the relationship is most likely going to be with the county, because we're further away from those central services, particularly in a place like LaPine. Now, we are certainly in a special circumstance given the youth of the city. We only incorporated in 2006, so that provides a certain relationship with the county that is not common, but I've seen in other rural communities, the further those cities are out, the more that you're going to see work between the county commissioners and the city council and the county administrator and the city manager.
We shut Steve's off.
So,
Smart move.
thank you. This is a good example of the partnership between cities right here. So, the other thing, and everybody's touched on it here, but one of the things that I think we've all experienced is when we can align, and again, it was touched on just a second ago, when we can align with those other districts, as we've said, in terms of being able to go after some funding federally or from the state. So there's power in having that alignment between the county and the city, or an irrigation district, for example, where we can go out and work with agencies or work with funding streams with federally and state to secure what we need to get things done. So being in alignment, as we've said earlier, is really powerful in securing the funding opportunities that we need to get those things done.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I'm going to go to one of the things that I think folks would appreciate is understanding the size of the area in which you are serving and the number of staff that you have. And I think for the smaller communities, it's an aha moment for me. And then, Geoff, we're going to come back to you in terms of federal agency involvement and talk a bit about wildfire. So, Jordan, so you serve a community of, and that could be Sisters Country, however you want to answer it. And how many staff do you have?
20.
Okay. 20.
So I like to make the point here that the smaller the town, often the city manager has to work a little bit harder than the big city.
Saying.
He needs to get his money out right now.
Money in the jar, Jordan, money in the jar.
I second that motion.
No, I mean, but actually, you know, I've had experiences in bigger towns, and one thing you have to work with is limited resources. You know, we have 20 staff members, you know, just a handful in City Hall. We're answering the calls, we're answering the complaints, we're working with City Council, we're working with the members of the public. In smaller communities, it's pretty tight-knit. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows your phone number. Everybody knows where you shop. You're basically on 24 hours a day. And because you don't have a lot of resources for multiple staff and you know, things like having a sustainability person or having somebody just in charge of equity or having somebody as a project manager, it's all hands on deck. In a lot of ways, our staff wear multiple hats. A lot of our directors are working managers where they're managing staff and other people's workloads, but they have their own, you know, work and projects and staff work to do. And so it's kind of fun to be in a smaller sort of environment that way because every day is different. Every day you have something new to do. I write staff reports. I write things for communication pieces, but I also, you know, work for the city council and meet, you know, with members of the public, and I have to direct staff. So you know, having experiences in multiple different, you know, size cities, you know, I joked about it being a harder job. It's definitely different, you know, and it makes you just think about all the 241 cities in Oregon. The majority of them are pretty small towns run by city administrators or city managers that have very limited staff that still have to clean the water and treat wastewater and provide public safety and library services and things like that. And I think we often just focus on big cities and the things they do, but city managers are, you know, out there in 240 different cities in Oregon, you know, taking on all these challenges just like the big towns.
Love it. Yeah. Applause for yes. I feel like Jordan, Keith had a furrowed brow. Go ahead. How are you feeling today? Are you cranky?
Is this one working?
Are you cranky?
There must be a therapist in the house. What the question was? How big are we?
We were asking about your staff.
I'd lost track.
Follow along, and just so you know, everyone, he has to leave early too.
Yesterday.
So
the what?
Yeah, I just let them know that you're going to leave early as well.
I am.
Okay.
And it's going to be in a fit of rage.
Yes.
But so we have almost 40,000 people as a population, and we have 273 people. But to your point about the number of hats you have to wear, the number of tasks, like we're going through right now for the last 5-6 plus years, our city attorney has also been the HR director, and we're actually going to hire an HR director in case there's someone in the audience or someone watching online that's interested. But it just shows how a lot of the work is done by very few people, and because we're trying to stretch the resources to deliver good for the taxpayers, aren't we, Tammy?
Look at you. That was great. Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Steve, will you help us?
I'm not going to take advantage of my friend Keith's youth and experience in city government, but
money in the jar.
We have about 10,000. Well, it says 11. We think it's about 12. Some of the sign says 10.
Is math tough in Kirk County?
Yeah, I think there's about 25,000 in Crick County, and hey, you know what, Tammy? My son Justin's here, and I've been waiting 30 years to say this. Hey, you pay this time, buddy. Anyway, you know you're getting older when your son's in the audience. So
I love
it. We have about 80 people, full-time people, and that fluctuates a little bit with the golf course in the summer months.
Okay. And I mean, that's a large geographic area too.
It is a large geographic area,
Yep.
but not very much population.
Sure.
So, again, I think it ties back to what we said earlier about partnering with the county, and a good example for us would be on public safety. So we have a very close relationship with Cook County Sheriff's Office and the Prineville Police Department. They're each other's backup. We coordinate our systems, all our systems between the IT side with what transactions go with the district attorney's office and all our communications so that we can talk to one another and work on that. So if we have a shift that's down a couple of folks, then we can fill in and vice versa. So very important that those relationships between the county and the city are working.
Yep. Thank you for pointing that out. Will.
So I have a question. If you have 10,000 people, 12,000, you have 80 people, does that mean you get a car and driver? Because, Madras is 8,200 and has 45 people, so.
Well, no, the answer is when we had a snow event, speaking of multitasking, they asked me to get on a backhoe, and I did. 6 cars and 27 mailboxes later, we got it. So I have not been asked to get back on for snow removal, so.
I can't imagine why.
Yeah, so Madras is 8,200 people. We have 45 employees. We have our own police department, run an airport, and run a golf course. Wow. So that's all really different from me coming from Western Washington, where didn't have an airport, didn't have a golf course, and it was very suburban.
Wow.
So.
So I can answer this directly with numbers, but there is an asterisk on it because, everything in LaPine's a little different, like our lawnmower races. Because we incorporated in 2006, the city limits essentially are drawn along the lines of the previous water and sewer districts. So to date, right now, that's about 3,100 people. But because that didn't occur until 2006, there are 12,000 people just outside that line that are still convinced they live in the city. And that's a conversation I have on a daily basis. So,
Lucky you.
So while we serve 3,100 people, we certainly have a wider hand in the conversations, which we will expand on later, to the larger regional population. I have 12 internal employees, including myself, and we have 2 contract employees. And a shameless solicitation, we are actively and very fervently recruiting our first internal civil engineer position at the city. So, because we're growing so fast, and we need
exciting. That really is exciting. Excellent. And how are things on Easy Street in Bend?
Easy Street, yeah. Is that on? Yeah, it's a little different. We have 780 full-time employees. We are basic service where we provide police and fire and utility systems, but we don't provide parks or library, which are often local government services. And we're always also looking for kind of that shared services model too. Even as a big city, we regularly partner with the county and other districts on things as well. So even being a big city doesn't mean we just take on everything. We're always looking for opportunities.
Yes. And although we poke fun at you a lot, you are an incredible partner. I mean, the city, your entire staff is really skilled at being able to look for ways in which we can leverage our resources and intellectual capital. So thank you. More to come on giving you a bad time. Geoff, let's go to federal partners and let's go to top of mind topic of Darlene Fire. So our new season, of course, is smoke, and the role of a city manager when we think about an event such as that. Do you mind walking us through a bit of what that's like?
I'd be happy to, and I want to start by saying I've never been so excited to see fall and winter coming before. Yeah. I think we all share that sentiment. In response to a conflagration event like wildfire that is abutting your community, I think we all share in that we have emergency response plans on our shelves. We've had programs that we've worked through, typically through a public involvement process, in addition to with state and federal agencies to say this is how we're going to respond in a circumstance. But I can tell you, having lived and run cities both in a fire-prone region and in a flood-prone region on the coast, it never unfolds the way that you think it's going to. That circumstance is certainly exacerbated by the fact that a city like LaPine is surrounded by federal land. So while we work with county or state partners when there's an event such as a wildfire conflagration, the first priority on my desk is to establish communication with the federal partners, because they're usually the ones sending in the resources for the immediate firefighting response. That will grow as the governor establishes a conflagration act or use of the conflagration act to send in state resources from other agencies. But priority is establishing the communication with the federal partners, particularly for access to our resources, which primarily is water. We've been providing water now, not to brag, but for about 90 days to many of the area fires, some of which have nothing to do with the region of LaPine, but we are the focal point for that resource. Interesting fun fact, this last summer when we had the Darlene 3 fire in LaPine, we had just finished the completion of our portion of our water and sewer expansion, which is our new lagoon. And I can't tell you how many millions of gallons right now off the top of my head, but suffice it to say, it makes Autzen Stadium look small. Lucky for us that the DEQ permit, and this is just an interesting little tidbit, allows for the use of the water in that lagoon for wildfire firefighting. So to save time on the helicopter rotations between the Deschutes and the Little Deschutes, they started dipping out of our wastewater reservoir. And that's an example of a real-time sort of game time change that happens when you're in those events. And that allowed the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM contractors to attack that 4,000 acre spread much more quickly. But to sum it all up, I'm sorry, I've been talking here for a bit. You first establish those communication lines from your plan with the regional U.S. Forest Service and BLM people. You move on to law enforcement in terms of where you're going to block people from being able to move to or to travel to, because you want to keep people out of the main theater of events. And then you start working with your county administrators and your county commissioners with your council to deal with the PR and the essentially, well, what you're going to say when the reporters show up. So, and a lot of this happens at 2 a.m., so it's always fun.
Right. And again, I mean, as we think about the role of a city manager, I mean, you are on all the time. Jordan, you mentioned at the grocery store, someone might have a question for you, but you also could be at a birthday party or something, and something happens, and you are the person who is to respond. So let's talk a little bit more about infrastructure and the infrastructure needs that we have, the challenges in being able to provide for that, the interaction between the state and federal funding or not that comes in to support us, and ways in which you learn from each other or that you leverage each other in terms of learning about investments and ways in which we can be addressing the infrastructure challenges we have. So I don't know if that's, go ahead.
I mean, I think there's a meeting tomorrow with the joint Committee on Transportation. So the House and Senate are going to be here in Bend. They're touring the state as we're gearing up for the 25 legislative session of a big investment in infrastructure. I think a good example of us working as a region, we have the Central Oregon Area Commission on Transportation, which COIC staffs. We have a Central Oregon Cities Organization where we all participate and kind of lobby, and we're all working together to identify our region's priorities that align with kind of safety and operations and maintenance, but also we have our individual community needs as well. So I think we're always looking to promote infrastructure from both perspectives, from a local and a regional perspective. And the North Corridor that's being done right now is a good example of that, where we really identify that as a key economic link in all of our regions, and so we all work together to leverage state and federal grants to get it done. As was said earlier, you don't get access to the money unless you're aligned, and that's the value, I think, of our partnership.
It's besides transportation, you've also got water and sewer infrastructure, and so part of what we're struggling with is we have a big demand in our area because we have cheaper land than you'll find in highbrow Redmond. So I'll put some money in, okay? But we've got to run water and sewer to it. And so I met with my friend Deborah here at Hayden Homes and talked about what we can do as a urban renewal, and talk about is infrastructure the piece that we each need to be putting in to encourage the affordable and workforce housing, which is a huge demand for Madras because we have a lot of industry there.
So let's talk about that connection. For the general public, they want to see affordable housing being built. But that to them often is what's on top of the ground. It's not the infrastructure that's required to be able to serve that, as well as the infrastructure that's needed to be able to serve the existing community that you already have. How is that synergy, and where are we? Oh, thank you, excellent. Okay, yep, we're no longer at Sherry's. Okay, so Talk about a bit about that synergy between the investments that are necessary, the challenges that you might have in terms of meeting that need to get to the buildable land inventories to make sure that you can actually build affordable housing. Yeah, who has that figured out?
We could talk infrastructure for the next couple hours. You're really getting to the heart of
Well, kind of back again, that common theme of alignment, and there is a lot of federal dollars available to incentivize municipalities and counties to build more affordable housing. So you kind of have that market rate base, and then you have the assisted side of subsidized housing for lower income folks. And one of the things that we've found, and others I'm sure, is we took advantage of some of that funding for Prineville. It was $2 million. And using what we just discussed as an example is we're taking that money and spreading it over about 5 projects, and those projects will provide city services to some sites that have been identified and actually applied for additional housing, and these are all multifamily. And so the inventory that we're going to see in Prineville is going to go up, which there will be market forces that I think will help the price of housing in Prineville. But to have that infrastructure ready to go, and even take it one step further and say we will provide that infrastructure as opposed to putting that on the developer, changes the economics of a lot of those projects into a position where, number one, they can be built to increase capacity, and number two, there's an opportunity for some low-cost options that go along with that. So often when we get into those situations where our plans call for a certain properties to be identified for housing projects, by the time you add the infrastructure costs in, we put that burden on the developers, the economics, especially in the conditions we're in right now, become very difficult. So anything I think that we can do as city managers to promote getting ahead of the game a little bit in terms of having the infrastructure there ready to go, and maybe at a lower cost than normal, would be really helpful. So that's what we're trying to do over in Prineville, and I think others as well.
I was going to say, infrastructure is really expensive, and I think because it's a buried asset, pipes, pump stations, treatment plants are off limits for the most part. Like, people don't realize how much these assets and this infrastructure costs. I know we have some home builders in the room. One way we pay for that is system development charges. So when a house gets built, with the building permits, they pay basically to pay for that growth, and they pay to buy into the system. And that only covers a portion of the cost to, build out an entire new part of the town, right? A subdivision, a commercial development, or something like that. So one of the economic development tools that we kind of have to encourage affordable housing and other goals the council might have is to subsidize some of that development. But guess what? A lot of the people that live in communities don't really like the idea of growth being subsidized, unless maybe it's for affordable housing or workforce housing, or is consistent with some of the goals of a community. Most places I've worked, one of the mantras is growth should pay for itself. But on the other side of that, if that is true, then everything would be really, really expensive, because pump stations, treatment plants, again, pipes, roads, roundabouts are all really, really expensive. In the 1950s, the federal government subsidized cities across the nation to build infrastructure. Today, we're largely on our own unless you meet certain criteria for income limits and things like that, which means those dollars aren't really available anymore. And so we have this choice of either having development pay for it through system development charges, subsidizing with property taxes, trying to get the federal dollars or the grants, the state funds as much as we can, or pass those costs on to existing users of those systems, which comes with political costs when you increase water rates and wastewater rates, stormwater rates, and all that.
I was going to ask a question for you all. I mean, transportation is the big bugaboo, right? I mean, because we do rely on transportation system development charges, but it's a cash or a timing thing. The money doesn't come in, and we need the project now to get it developed. And so how do you find another alternative funding source to get it cash funded? We can do that with utility rates, with water and sewer, because folks are paying a monthly rate for that service, and you can kind of help to manage that. Transportation is much more difficult. Do some of you have ways around that?
Well, years ago, Madras was debating a food tax, 5%, on prepared food, and that was going to generate a couple $1 million a year just because we have so many restaurants and people driving through. That was one way we were going to look at it, but right as that was getting rolled out, the pandemic hit. So they pulled it from the ballot. So they're reenacting that conversation to say, what do we want to do? To Eric's point, I have to be nice to him because he's my mentor, so I've got to behave myself. Keith, on the other hand, that's a different story. But
I know.
But yes, I
That's
know.
okay, you're leaving early.
Good. But the gist of it is, you have to be able to try to find some way to do it, and we may wind up bonding against any revenue source, but that's incredibly risky because you're looking for some steady level income, and that may not happen if you're doing a prepared food tax.
So, community, are you going to go to tax abatements? Oh, no, not yet.
I wanted
Okay, go ahead.
to
Yep.
hang on what they're saying. So I think it's interesting today that we're talking about how the power of being aligned and the power of being in partnership amongst ourselves and amongst the other stakeholders. One of the things, and I need to give a shout out to Deschutes River Conservancy, Ochoco Irrigation District, Farmers Conservation Alliance. So we in Prineville actually put together funding sources from several different aspects: agriculture, water conservation, city, transportation dollars, STC dollars, and we're in the process right now of building the biggest road project, municipal road project in the history of our community that will connect a large portion of our population that really only has one way in Prineville, one way out. And this is an example, I think, of the power of the relationships that we all have and the relationships that we have with other partners. Again, this was an effort for funding that came from Ochoco Irrigation District on conserved water. I mentioned this just a second ago. Our work with Deschutes River Conservancy from a conservation and a habitat standpoint, and then again just the transportation dollars that the city has, and I think it's a 14 million. And so what's going to happen is we're going to have this new road system that's also the foundation for a new pipe system, which will conserve water and upgrade our Ochoco Irrigation District so that it can do another conservation project on the upper stretches of Mackay Creek for salmon reintroduction. So all these things, the habitat conservation plan, the needs of our farming partners in our Ochoco Irrigation District, all that came together with funding to allow a project like this to happen. So when those opportunities to put those synergies together present themselves, I can assure you we're going to jump on that, and that has proven again to be very successful.
That's great. So one of the pieces also, on occasion, you get asked for a tax abatement, particularly around affordable housing. I know that the good city of Bend took up a couple of front page articles in terms of, and the council took a couple of lumps in terms of being able to provide a tax abatement to a particular project. That's working out a little differently in Crook County and in Prineville. Do you mind talking about the sawmills to data centers and a bit about, I know that wasn't something that the community said, yes, we think we absolutely should have these data centers. That's going to put us on the map. And then in 10 years, we're going to have all this money coming. I don't remember that as the discussion. I remember it was a little different.
So I anticipated this and asked Sean Ray Hawkins, our PR person, to answer any really tough questions.
Oh, good.
So I yeah, pivot. You gotta just love it, don't you?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Is that a staff person? I'm just kidding.
Yes, she is actually. Yeah.
Love it.
Actually on contract. So for Prineville, yeah, I mean, we had that unique opportunity. I assume you're talking about the data centers. And if you remember back in time, during the Great Recession, Prineville lost a lot of population. We were in really tough shape. We were at the bottom of the barrel in terms of average median income for all of Oregon, of the 36 counties. I did bring a stat today. Remarkably, we are number 3 in the state of Oregon. So, with that comes some challenges. Obviously, there's people that haven't been able to participate that, and we've left behind, and we're working on that. But back to the sawmill connection. So, I always use the analogy of where we were at after World War II as a community, and yes, before Keith said I was there. But anyway,
I will try to stay awake during this story.
Okay, thank you, thank you. You know, the support we get is really tremendous. Anyway. We were very vibrant in Prineville. We had Les Schwab starting his business. We had 5 big sawmills. we had remand plants, we had our federal government agencies, and Prineville built new schools, built new hospitals, built new parks. And what's really remarkable right now with the data center family being in there, the fruit company and Meta, and they have provided the jobs and the average wage to create a renaissance where what are we doing? New hospital, new schools, new roads. We own the biggest park that you can imagine with the Barnes Butte acquisition. A lot of partnership in that, that's another story. And when we put those data centers in place with 15-year tax abatement agreements, we were really rolling the dice, but we had 22% unemployment. We make a joke, former Judge Mike McCabe and I said, you know, if it fails, we're gonna have the nicest hay sheds in the whole country. It hasn't failed, they continue to invest, and those tax abatements, the first group of those will roll off in 2027, meaning we will start collecting on the first couple of buildings that Facebook built. Now to put that in perspective, our whole tax assessment district, all the dollars for the county is about $2 billion, including the city. So far, there's been over $10 billion invested in Crook County. And the first two buildings are multiple $billion-dollar investments. We don't know exactly what central assessment, so it's not like the Crook County assessor is going to go up there and assess everything that will go through the state. But we have some significant certainty on what that's going to mean, and it's significant. So kind of back to the challenges of a city manager and working with council and working with the other taxing districts and the other governing bodies such as the county is how do we take that incremental growth in tax-based revenue and be effective with it on the highest and best use for the benefit of our community and our taxpayers. And that's what we're working on right now. We've been working on for a number of years. We pulled in some third-party consultation and got together with our electeds and said, what's those buckets of priority that we want to see? Infrastructure, amenities, financial security, and those type of things. So for Prineville, it's been great. It's been a great incentive. I'm personally, I think it's unfortunate that we have to incentivize business to come, but that's the world we live in. I always make the assessment of when we were negotiating, a lot of our citizens said, hey, you're giving the farm away. You're crazy to give them tax abatements. But that land had no tax value. Some of it was the county. It was ag land, which really was crazy because it's rocks and sagebrush and a little bit of grass. And so there was no tax income. Without the tax abatements coming due, they're in the top 5 tax receipts of our county because of the value of the land now all of a sudden is very, very high. So we are benefiting from that. And so it worked in Prineville. I think Prineville's changed as a result of that. I don't know what the viability is going forward. But I will say this, if you look out throughout our country, these big companies are leveraging their jobs and their impact to the local economies by negotiating for tax exemptions. So if we're going to play ball and we're going to diversify our individual economies, we have to play the game, in my opinion. So let's be smart about it. In Prineville, it's worked out. I think it would be different if a big company came to Prineville and said, hey, we want a 15-year tax abatement. I don't think we have the appetite for it right now. It might be something different. But I think we would be open to have some kind of incentive through an abatement process to incentivize more businesses to come in and more job creation.
Excellent, and congratulations. That is... This work is not without risk.
I think it's kind of a mindset issue, going back to what you're saying, Steve, of like whether it's housing or jobs. If we are going to be viable communities, we have to engage, we have to get in the game, right? And you have to sort of understand the market, understand the risks of the private sector, and then being willing to open your books as the public sector, having the private sector do the same thing of saying, what will it take to get this thing done? Because I think sometimes cities think, well, we can just plan, we can come up with these great plans and visions and it'll just happen. It doesn't just happen. And so you have to take some risks to do that, to address community needs. So same conversation with housing of how to make that balance happen. We're in the middle of it right now too.
Yeah. Eric, thank you. And I just have to say this, because I'm so darn proud of it, is the site manager for Apple in Prineville, Oregon, is a young man named Clay Allen. Clay Allen's family's been in Prineville since the 1850s. He came up through Crook County High School. He became an electrician. He worked in the sawmill industry for a short time, and then he went to work for Apple when they came to Prineville, and he's come up the ranks, and he's now the site manager. So the impact it has on, I'm using him as an example of many, that this has changed their life. You know, their ability to meet the needs of their families and create an opportunity that way is just tremendous. So it's not just Prineville, and I say that every time I get up here, it's not just Prineville, it's all of Central Oregon. If you try to drive to Bend from Prineville at 7:30 in the morning, it's amazing how many people are coming our way, or Madras Highway, or Redmond, and vice versa, obviously. But we're all in this together, and I think that's really important, as Eric was pointing out, that we got to be working on these issues together.
So, yes.
So I had one other city that's just exploded with growth is Redmond, and I didn't want Keith to feel left out.
Thank you, Will.
So I hear that the airport is going to grow.
You hear that the airport has grown? No, it's like structurally the same size as it was yesterday. No, I told Tammy my goal today was to not really talk too much. So because for those of you that come to the forum, sometimes it ends up being like Redmond and Ben talking the whole time, and there's really amazing things that are happening. I always view like our jobs, and it's like Sim City, right? And some of the smaller cities are at one end of it, Ben's at the other. We all learn from each other. So from Prineville, we took your wetlands project, that concept, and are using it to expand our wastewater treatment plant.
Invoices in the mail.
Yeah. And then, from Ben, they do a lot of things right, and we learn from that. They do things wrong, we do things wrong, and we all learn from each other. And it's always somebody kind of testing, and then us being able to prove it up, us collectively. And so, yeah, for Redmond, right, I got here, 11 years ago, and we were around 25,000, adding a couple thousand per year. And I don't want that card to go up. So 2 quick things on the airport. First of all, when we get back to how we finance things, since the federal government and the state doesn't have the resources, or at least not writing the checks to pay for infrastructure, we need to build arterials on our own. So we're going to be building a connection from 97 over to 126. It's a $45 million project, and we're able to do that by creating a citywide car rental tax and using the proceeds to help underwrite the debt service to get that project done. And without those kind of tools, this project couldn't have happened, because we don't have the money, the state doesn't have the money, and anyone that's driven 97, really any part of it, knows how difficult it is. And as Steve talked about, the traffic to Prineville is increasing. And then the airport, right, so we're breaking ground next year on basically doubling the size of the terminal, and we're getting more than 1 million passengers a year through there. What it's going to end up being is basically you'll have like 7 planes you'll be loading through sky bridges, which you're used to probably in any airport that you fly to from Redmond if it's of any size, and then you'll still have kind of the smaller a few that you walk on as well. And right, we always joke around the airport being the economic engine for the region, and it really is. And I'll talk to folks that are fairly new and wondering, why is the airport in Redmond? How come a city owns the airport? And but to us, it's really important. To the reach, it's important. Being able to get the first phase of this project done, and about 90 million of the 170 is being funded internally, just from basically the different profit setters within the airport. We're getting federal dollars as well, and definitely appreciate the role of the federal delegation in helping us get those resources. So that's one of the ways which, we're trying to invest in the growth that's happening in the region to kind of keep pace.
Love it. And all joking aside, if you do need to go, just go ahead when you need to. Okay, yeah, 15, perfect. So Will, I'd love to talk about what's happening in Madras and in Jefferson County in terms of economic development, some of the airport infrastructure that you're working on. And then I believe you have an incubator project that's happening in the LaPine community, several. So if we could go to those. And then I also want to talk about kind of what are you working on together right now? Maybe it's Core 3, maybe it's some other things. But Will, do you mind?
Yeah, so our airport was built right at the cusp of World War II. It has a 5,000-foot runway, like many cities in Central Oregon. It was for P-38s and B-17 bomber trial runs, which is interesting because we have Erickson Museum there and Erickson Aero Tanker, and we actually have one of the few flyable if you're gutsy enough, you can ride in the little belly gunner of a B-17, and it takes people up for rides all the time. It's astounding the investment they're making, because the Forest Service component of it is huge, because they fly into Redmond, fill up with their pink goo, and then drop it.
Technical term.
It's a technical term, yes. But for us, we are trying really hard to promote the airport, because it's a 2,000-acre piece of property, and we only have about a third, well, maybe closer to a fifth of it actually developed out. So there's a lot of real estate there. And so we've had a lot of interest in basically heavy industrial coming in. So we're working with EDCO on a couple of projects, and then there was a developer that wanted to build, we'll see if whether it actually does anything or not, a fancy car condo, and we decided that I need to ask him for something of value back, which was an amphitheater. Stole that idea from my mentor Eric here, who said, Bend is full. We need somewhere else to hold concerts. And so we are looking at a 6,000 to 8,000 seat amphitheater in Madras, which would really make a big difference for us, because I said it's a value add back. We have a lot of hotels that do not fill up on the weekends. This is a way to bring in people that would stay instead of driving to Redmond. I mean, why would you do that when you can stay in Madras? So.
Right. Do you also have Daimler there?
Oh yes, of course we have Daimler. So Daimler has a basically a secret test track there.
Right.
And
well, their secret's out, I guess.
yeah, well, behind the curtain. You got to go behind the door to go through the curtain. They don't let you take pictures inside. But the gist of it is there are 2027, 2028, 2029 semis are all being tested there. They work at breaking them as best they can through the course that they have, and they're also tried out electric, and the challenges and opportunities that come with that. But so Daimler was kind of our footprint. Ericsson Aero Tanker came along right around the same time, and so to build on Steve's comment, we're in that renaissance phase. We're trying to build that next piece of what that looks like.
Excellent. And how about in the LaPine community?
I just wanted to ask briefly, I saw the sign for 5 minutes.
So I think it's 5 minutes until we start taking questions from all of you.
Okay.
So if you all have a question, we have one mic in the back, so we will watch you battle it out as you try to figure out who's up first. So, yep.
So
right ahead.
we have an enormous resource at our disposal in that, again, prior to our incorporation, the county had the forethought to attain many acres from BLM, not the least of which is about the 150 acres that remain in our industrial park. And we have an ongoing, what we call intergovernmental agreement with the county, where we both benefit from the sale of that land for the development of light industrial manufacturing, distribution type businesses. It's sort of a classic three-legged stool problem, though. We have this land that's shovel ready with infrastructure put in, roads, water, sewer, fiber, but there's not the jobs. And the jobs say, well, we need the people, and the people say, well, we need the housing. And so we're trying to figure this all out at once, especially through some incentives that we've built in with low-income housing tax credit recently for some new housing developments, not necessarily germane to the question, but about 110 units that are going to come online that are what we would call affordable housing accessible or low-income housing accessible. But as it relates to the industrial park, we've been very fortunate in that the state has come along through application on our part, and they're providing us with a nice chunk of money to develop a spec building that will house about 5 new businesses. In addition to, the county's provided us with a parcel of land that will generate another spec building with space for 5 more businesses. And we had another incentive program where somebody's purchased land at the dirt cheap price of $1.75 a square foot that's going to develop a 3rd spec building that will create space for about another 5 businesses. So we're fortunate in the regard that we have some of these starting points where businesses can actually habitate, because we are at a huge loss for commercial space in the community. But we're hoping that this will be the catalyst that will then drag the people from the accessible housing projects, and that we can start this cycle going and move forward, and it will essentially build exponentially on itself.
That's great. Okay, so let's talk community involvement. And just like belly buttons, everyone also has an opinion. How are you engaging that?
I thought you were going to the questions from the audience.
Oh, not yet. So in terms of engagement and how you wrangle the spirited dialogue that occurs within community, I know that we have C4C in Sisters, and I know we have a budding new Newberry Regional Partnership. some of that, we have Embrace Bend. We have a lot of ways in which the councils, and with your leadership also, trying to find a pathway to engage the dialogue between the community and the city. How do you do that? And then if you want to talk about the program that you have or things that you're doing, please do.
I'll jump on this one first. We kind of have a similar situation, but this goes back to some of my earlier comments in that we have this fascinating population with those that are within the limits and those that are right outside. And it did inspire a community conversation between myself, other community leaders from nonprofit sector, others that are affiliated with county government, and private industry in the concept of how are we going to engage with this group, particularly when we continually have people showing up at council meetings looking for answers that a lot of the time not only do they not live in the city limits, they live in a different county. And so we erased that concept of city limits, county limit lines, and we started thinking around the idea of zip code and region. What folks consider this region their home, what folks in this South County area consider the city of LaPine their access point for services. And we built the concept of the Newberry Regional Partnership around that. It's been going on now for about a year and a half, but some important benchmarks, and just to give you some where the rubber meets the road, we started with a community survey with a statistical organization, a statistician that came in, and in our original survey for visioning, we'd asked a series of questions basically built around the concept of what is most important to you in the Newberry region. We had over 2,200 responses in that initial survey, which is statistically significant for our regional population. We did have to cut a slice off the top because we live in the time of automation and bots that respond to things, but we still had over 1,200 what I would say reputable answers to that survey. We've since moved forward, and we're in strategic planning right now with the consultant, but where we've had real success, and let me give you some examples of where this really means something to the folks in our community. Following the Darlene 3 fire, we had a community summit on insurance, fire insurance for your home, because people were getting dropped in South County left and right. And we provided them with resources, and that's not going to work out perfectly for everyone, but access to concepts and resources that they otherwise would not have known of so they can stay in their homes. That has built what I think refer to as common goodwill in the community. And while it's not necessarily coming from the city council or the city of LaPine or Deschutes County, there are governmental individuals involved, and it is knocking down barriers where there, I think, has historically been not a lot of faith or trust in governmental agencies, and it is building consensus, and we are seeing a lot of success with this. And that's just one example. Recently, a secondary one to that, much through the efforts of Ms. DeBone, who's part of the Newberry Regional Partnership and on our board. We went out and had lots of money and resources donated by Republic Services and the cleanup organization here in Bend. Their name escapes me at the moment, but we cleaned up camps that have been essentially scarring our regional community for some time that we're all experiencing. And so these are real world successes that we've experienced through this regional planning and community gathering process. And not that money matters, but I think within the first year, we've already gotten about $50,000 in contributions from 501c3s to move this work forward. So we're very excited.
Way to go, Newberry Country. All right. Yep. And Kathy.
On a larger scale, this is an area that cities continue to have to innovate. It changes. Landscape's changing constantly with social media, expectations on what does democracy look like in our communities, people wanting to have a say in almost every level of the decision-making process, from solution generation to actually, coming up with the problems. And our elected officials, to their credit, do want really good public input. That's what they demand, I think, over anything of our staff, and probably from the city managers here on this panel, is make sure we're engaging with the public. It's always on our list of goals. It's always, on our work plans to come up with new ways to engaging our citizens and what the council and what the city's up to. And so, just from the simple things that we're doing, is changing the way and times that we engage the public. I mean, we're having a community conversation about houselessness in our community next month. We're doing it on a Sunday at 4 p.m. Why? Well, we've actually seen amazing turnout, 200 people showing up to talk about housing and sisters on a Sunday afternoon. It's a lot easier for people with families to show up on a Sunday instead of trying to pick up their kids after school and make dinner and then show up to a city council meeting and testify for 3 minutes. I mean, those models are sort of over. I think the difficulty for us is how do we engage on things like social media and get the word out? The algorithms that we're up against where, the more provocative things out there like dogs and cats are being taken over the feeds rather than us trying to share information that we think the public needs to know. Another thing, we do coffee with council, so things that you can, show up at after you drop off your kids at school, come and have a coffee and donut with city council and just have informal conversations. We do tabling events where we'll go to Sisters Coffee or we'll go to Fika Coffee, we'll go to the grocery store and just pop up a stand and say, hey, what's going on? You want to talk about the urban growth boundary expansion? And again, a lot of this stuff is not that sexy to talk about. And so the way we message things, the way we pose questions is important. And we got to meet people where they're at because a lot of times they come in with not a lot of information, not a lot of background information on what an issue it really is. But if you, again, try to come up with alternative ways and different times and even providing childcare and things like that, you might get more participation. Just go back to what Geoff was talking about. Yes, Sisters Country is a thing. The city of Sisters is, I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning, it's only 4,000 people. We're growing pretty fast. It's gonna be above 4,000 pretty soon. But the broader area, of course, has another 10, 12,000 people, which is part of the school district and, stretches all the way practically to Camp Sherman, which a lot of those folks feel like they're a part of our community too. And we have to balance that of they're not registered voters in Sisters, right? They're not voting for the city councilors. They're not paying property taxes for those services that we provide. But they are a part of our community in terms of they're coming to our businesses. Their kids are going to the schools. They're going to the library. They're coming to our parks. And so we do want to hear those voices too. I mean, 10,000 people, 10,000 cars come Highway 20, every day. And a lot of those folks are our broader community. So there was an effort several years ago called the Sisters Country Visioning, and that really set the stage for how we manage growth in Sisters. It stretched beyond just the city limits. It came up with a vision for our area, and that kind of led into the city then, working on an update to our comprehensive plan, which fed into more plans. We do a lot of planning in cities, but that engagement was just paramount to coming up with how the city of Sisters is going to manage our growth and be consistent with what the broader community vision was.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to hold off there because speaking of taking public input, we have Kyle Frick, who are partners at Mid-Oregon Federal Credit Union, who has a question for us. So yes, bye Keith. Thank you so much.
First of all, thank you all for being here. We really appreciate hearing how you're managing and solving the problems that we have today and just the collaboration that you have together. And I think you're all supporting a better place to live here in Central Oregon, so thank you. I guess my question kind of goes to looking beyond managing the problems that we have today, what things do you see as far as sustainable to continue to make Central Oregon a great place, whether that be technology, environment, or other things? What do you see on the horizon that you're working on that we can kind of understand where we're going from here, or where you think what that vision might be?
So I want to give a quick shout out to Keith. I'm sorry he had to leave, but in all seriousness, the man has done an amazing job with groundwater because water rights is a gigantic issue, and the city of Redmond has really taken a champion charge with that. And Keith has done an amazing job in facilitating discussions around it because, to your point, sir, the future of Central Oregon has a lot to do with water rights. And so where we go with it, where the growth occurs, is where the water's going to be. And what the farmers do or can't do is going to all depend upon water rights. And Redmond has done an amazing job with helping navigate that dialogue.
For the city of Bend, we actually just went through a training on artificial intelligence. We're really trying to be leaders in that space of not being scared of it, but actually managing through it, having good policies that help guide our use of it, because it can help us write issue summaries, PowerPoints, all the things that we have to do to save on staff resources so that we can actually spend more time connecting with human beings on a human level. So like making sure that the city is on the forefront and not just scared of AI, and that there's a whole effort. We've got a work group and all sorts of things. I would say that's one example of us looking out ahead, because that's really going to change our landscape significantly.
Other comments? Okay, I see that the mic is without a person. Do we have other questions?
Well, I'd like to pose a question to the group.
Oh, good, Will. All right.
Do you think that the challenges of the unhoused is a city issue or a regional issue? Why is that? Anybody have a solution to it?
Yes. Well, but let's dive in, because I think that's sort of an elephant in the room, is that we have an unhoused crisis. It's a public health concern. It's a safety concern, both for those that are living in the encampments and those that are not. For those of you that are not tracking this, I'm not sure where you've been, but I'll just let you know that because we have a lot of public lands, we are inundated with individuals that are living in our unincorporated areas that are out in the encampments, which is, we have the highest rate of unsheltered homelessness in the state of Oregon, and that is because we live in a beautiful area that has a lot of public land availability. That creates a significant issue in being able to both get individuals out of encampments if we have a wildfire, which happens, and it also creates an issue. By the way, folks need to cook food, which is why they have fire. They are not starting fires because they're trying to keep warm when it's 96 degrees outside. So for all of that, that's a preamble. You all have been doing some time, place, and manner codes. You've been putting into play. Will, you may want to chat about that. You just had an encampment that you moved. You had a shelter network that was stood up. Let's share a little bit about what you're doing in terms of addressing this as an issue. And then I think it is an open forum of this won't be solved individually, and it's not going to be solved at this panel. It's going to be solved in this room with all of us. So who wants to take it first?
So I'll throw the first ball out. Madras had a camp that was in existence for 2.5, 3 years. It was right along a basically stormwater creek. And when we actually had to close it because of health issues, we had huge contamination issues in the waterway. We pulled out 300,000 pounds of garbage and big buckets of human waste that had just been thrown into the creek bed. And so we're still dealing with that. COIC has been kind enough to help us with some assessment money, but it's a huge problem. So even though you may relocate a camp to another area, there's the cleanup of the contamination and all the other pieces that come with it. And it's a struggle for cities because there's so many competing interests for dollars, and we are having to put a significant amount of money towards that. We spent $35,000, $40,000 cleaning all that up between staff time and disposals and everything else, because we couldn't just take some of this material to a typical landfill. It had to be burned because of the fentanyl issues and all the things that were in the soil. So it's become a challenge for us. We built a shelter with a lot of help from the state and other agencies to help them with a place to stay, and unfortunately it's only half used. And so it's open for business from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. and 29 beds, and they're only filling 14. So while we're trying to encourage others to utilize that service, but it's expensive. And so I'm getting questions from community members saying, why isn't that money being used for X or Y or Z? And it's hard to answer that question when there's a state mandate, or more importantly, there is a need to do something, but we're all trying to figure out what that something is.
I want to add something to this. I think it's really important to put into the context. You'd mentioned time, place, and manner restrictions. this issue is not the same color across each community, and it doesn't mean that I'm referring to the different types of individuals or anything of that nature, but this really comes down to, in most cases, where is it located? If you're within the city limits, you can apply your local code enforcement to it under the current home rule authority that cities have. But in more rural areas, and I think we share some of this, surrounded by federal land, we have a whole different animal, because the federal laws apply, and local law enforcement, if it's warranted, can only come out and apply their rules when local law is being violated. So what we've done is really worked hard to build relationships with the federal partners, and we know they're under a lot of duress because they don't have the funding they need, the appropriations they need from Congress, namely BLM and U.S. Forest Service. But instead of pointing fingers with those agencies, we've tried to build relationships and find common solutions, at least insofar as the maintenance and the safety of these areas. There's a lot more to be done, especially in terms of what a small city like LaPine can do. But if we've at least addressed the initial problem that is right adjacent to us on federal land.
I was just going to say, Tammy, you're probably the most qualified.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm like, you should be answering this question.
Yeah, I mean, out of all the issues we've talked about and the original question about regional coordination, this issue is by far the most regional, most coordinated amongst everybody that's a public agency, nonprofit, churches, et cetera, in Central Oregon, which is effective. I think we're getting there to your good work and the Coordinated Houseless Response Office. Geoff, you're right. I mean, each city and each, the surrounding areas of our city have a different sort of element that we're dealing with and different approaches on how that's being addressed. But this is a region. And I think, yes, the audience is correct that out of all these issues, this needs to be approached on a regional basis because, if you clamp down in one area, it's going to pop up in another, right? And these are folks, the point in time count, what are we at? 1,400?
Yeah, it was increasing in the region. It has been increasing. We saw some dips in Bend and Redmond. I think there's some capacity that has come online that has helped, but it's not just the shelter. I think it's a whole portfolio of options that are needed. Safe parking, congregate shelter, non-congregate shelter. Everybody's needs are a little bit different, so the solution sets are also different, which are very resource intensive, take a lot of coordination. Just to shout out, I'm looking at Nick, we had a pretty big breakthrough meeting between the City Council and Deschutes County last week of very different political viewpoints, but I think we can come together and create solutions that really create better safety and address the public health and safety and fire risk issues, but also try to move people into a more productive situation and have to balance all those things with strategy that it's not easy. It's been a lot of bumps on the road, but I think we're starting to see some progress.
So creating a safe stay area, so yes.
Eric, I think you're bringing up some really great points. We are a little bit different in our circumstances as it relates to homelessness. But also at the same time, we have a responsibility to take care of those in need right now. But more importantly, that's kind of what I would call current state. What's the future state need to look like? And what do we need to be doing to move in that direction? And back to your point, Eric, what is that strategy? I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We've done some work at our police department by having a clinical person be also a licensed public safety officer at the same time. And what we found as that program has grown is that a lot of times we can have contact with people that are struggling and get them back in the system, back on their meds, and that allows them to maybe, enter the workforce, for example. But I think that we as Central Oregonians need to consider what that current state needs to be and how do we kind of drill down into some of those root causes effects. Some people need more help than we can give them. Some people can get some direction and some guidance, some coaching and mentoring and come out of that and get back into the workforce and get back into having a productive life. So I think, this group of people in the room today, our electeds, our staff at the cities and the counties, it's time to get outside the box and find some solutions. And it's easy for me to sit up here and say that, I realize that, but we can do it. We just have to get started and deal with what we need to deal with to keep these people safe, but really start looking at what are those longer term solutions and how do we affect that change positively.
Yes, and we can do it. Thank you. Okay, we have a question.
Do you have time?
Absolutely.
All right. Amy Sabadini. I work for Civics Learning Project. My question is, I I think it was about a year ago, I went to a Rotary Forum on addiction and addiction treatment. Now that we have this deferral option, I'm wondering if the situation has changed or is the same. We heard at that forum that one of the barriers to serving people in need was we didn't have a workforce to fill the jobs to serve in those treatment centers. I'm wondering if that's the case also in dealing with houselessness. Are you having trouble hiring? Are you having trouble with workforce housing? The affordability of our area, is that one of the barriers still?
I would say yes, yes, and yes. And I don't mean that in a sort of to minimize the magnitude of what you just said. And this is a great intersection between the role of the county in terms of behavioral health services, which would mean access to treatment, as well as behavioral health, peer support specialists, et cetera. I would say that the nonprofit network is beyond capacity. And so one of the things that we are seeing is money is coming into our region now from the executive order from the governor's office and the legislature. And we have a nonprofit network that is saying, we can't do more. We are at capacity of what it is that we're doing today. And we probably last week were over capacity too. We probably are also missing some pieces to a system, a continuum that you would have in terms of the services that we should be providing. We are light on things like case management. And as you might imagine, you have an individual who is going from the traumatic experience of living in an unsheltered environment. We don't just move them into housing and then say, what would you like us to DoorDash you for dinner? That individual needs to be treated in the manner and honored in the fact that they've been through that trauma so that we can get them the resources, so that we can get them in the place where they can be in a space that they can take in the services in which we might have available. So we as a community have, as the fastest growing region for decades now, one of the things that we didn't have is the federal funding that would be in a community such as ours, establishing a network of shelters. So Bethlehem Inn, being our first shelter, came online in 2007. That in terms of, that was our first shelter, and that is way behind in terms of the need that we have in the region to serve the growth that we have, just as without a crisis of a pandemic and et cetera. And so there is a coordinated effort of looking at what those resources are that are in need, but we probably need to be coming together over a bottle of wine and chatting about how we're going to start some new nonprofits. And we have a lot of nonprofits, but I can tell you that the current structure we have is breaking. And it is good people doing great work, and they also are in need of housing. So in terms of your question, that it's an important one. And there is funding in the system to be able to help on the behavioral health side to bring up some of those resources. But let's talk 110 and sort of diversion as well.
Deflection, which is the kind of the reform of Measure 110. We actually just had an update yesterday at a council subcommittee, and we are starting, Deschutes County, their sheriff's office has kind of led an effort in partnership with Best Care, and there's another a nonprofit that provides treatment. It's escaping me. But anyways, there's 4 folks that are assigned doing outreach, working in coordination with law enforcement to help give folks that option that are in possession of controlled substance to take treatment over the criminal justice system. So that is now live as of like a week ago. So it's very new. So we can't report yet quite on the success, but it's moving forward.
Great question. But yes, please.
Hi, my name is Paige Hamp. I'm with the Tower Theater, but new to Bend, and I love it, and I love to see the cooperation because I did a lot of work in North Carolina around this issue where there was not people talking to each other like you guys do, so congratulations. I got to travel around a lot and look at how to deal with homeless, affordable housing. That was a big thing for me. I came out of that as as a child, low-income housing. There is an incredible model in Austin that is called Community First. It's a 51-acre planned development that you might want to take a look at. I've traveled down there. They're doing great things, and they've brought nonprofits together and helped increase the nonprofit impact. But if someone like me, so at the Tower, I'm a fundraiser, and I do campground development contracting. How do I get involved, or who do I call first if I want to help in this arena? because I have 25 years of experience working in it.
Excellent. I'm happy to connect with you after this. Happy to. You betcha. Be careful what you wish for.
Spoke to the right person.
No, I love it, and I miss making a difference. I love working for the tower and what we do, but this is my heart, and I just am new to Bend. So.
Thank you. And we sent a team
Thank
to
you.
Austin.
And actually, Nick, I think, did you go tour that when we were in Austin for this? We had a city manager and county administrator conference last year in Austin and toured what you're talking about, so are familiar with it.
Thank you. And it is going to take all of us. This is one of those all hands on deck, right, Mickey? All hands on deck. And our community needs us. And we have shown that when we show up, we can solve really sticky, prickly issues. So,
I was just going to brag about some of that, talking about affordable and workforce housing. Even a small community like Sisters can make a little difference in creating more units for our workforce. Affordability in Central Oregon is an issue, and anyone who's seen home prices and mortgage rates recently would know that. And so, our council is, very concerned about how do we have the right housing, affordable housing for folks to be able to live and work and raise their children and play in our community, and actually putting money towards that. And so we have a 40-unit affordable housing development that will be coming on in the next couple of years that is supported by city grant funds. Habitat for Humanity of Sisters is producing units and really ramping up. I think they've got 27 units that they're going to be supported by city funds for that. The council actually increased our TLT, or our hotel motel taxes, to start creating a fund for more affordable housing. And so, all this growth that's happening in Central Oregon and the relation to things like houseless, because there is folks in the Sisters Country area that actually work in the city at gas stations, restaurants, that actually are homeless. They're living in RVs in the National Forest, and they can't afford a place in Sisters or anywhere in Central Oregon. So that, to kind of Steve's point, the long term, beyond the behavioral health and drug addiction, things like that, is also just the affordability and creating a variety of housing that is actually more affordable, that is for teachers, firefighters, city employees, folks that, are not at the income limits, or income levels to actually be able to afford a new single family home. But some of these developments that are happening that are workforce or affordable are actually pretty attractive, well built, and supported by public funds, even from a small community like Sisters.
That's incredible, yes. So let's end on a positive. I know that there was recently an article, a lot of home starts that are coming online in the community of LaPine. Do you all want to run through any large developments that are coming online?
Yeah, I'll just give you a quick rundown. So I touched on this earlier. I mean, over the last 4 years, it's been about 450 new units between single and multifamily. One of the
450
in Little
that is
LaPine,
a lot.
yeah,
that is a lot.
And one of the feathers we have on our cap, I think I might have touched on this. We have that 350-acre parcel that is all zoned residential in city limits, that is now buildable. It was always buildable, but now even more buildable. We're at the 97% mark on our $46 million water and sewer expansion. So that is now connected to those resources. But recently, in the last 2 years, we had a 59-unit low-income housing tax credit application that's approved. It's about 50% done. 36 new Habitat units just went through subdivision. And then Foundation for Affordable Housing are proposing 49 more affordable units, in addition to roughly about 200 total units in the last 2 years in LaPine. So
that's incredible. Others? Things you want to, thank you. Yes. Will.
Madras has 1,032 either under construction or have been constructed in the last 18 months. 110 of those are affordable units based on a federal grant.
Wow. And that's incredible. Yeah. Yep. I know. Isn't that exciting? Exactly.
So here's a great one, Eric. Thank you so much. But the craft beer industry in the Bend and all of Central Oregon, but certainly centered in Bend, has gotten big enough now where our Central Oregon Railroad, City of Prineville Railroad, is now hauling barley for the local craft beer industry. So good for us and good for, thank you.
That's That's exciting. Yes. Jordan.
Yeah, to talk a little bit more about housing. I mean, we have a couple big developments that are underway right now. Our challenge is land supply.
Sure.
I mentioned the urban growth boundary. I think everybody, if you're Oregonian, you know about UGBs. And so we're right in the middle of that process, which is going to take a couple years. But we've initiated that. We're going to need another 250 acres, and the majority of that is residential land. And so we do have, developments happening right now. I think there's about 400 units that have been built or will be built in the next couple of years. All that rapid growth means a lot of tension over growth, right? How do you maintain the character of Sisters, the cute western town, while the city grows from just, 20 years ago it was 900 people, or 4,000 now. And we're going to double in population in the next 20 years too. And so this process is really important for us to engage the community, to understand what the values are. How do we grow? How do we develop new neighborhoods in a way that looks and feels like Sisters, but is affordable, sustainable, using solar, things like that. And this is our opportunity to really master plan the next big growth for our town. These things take time. So, as we start, things slow down in the pipeline. A UGB expansion takes a couple years. Then you have the master planning process. Then you have an annexation process. Then you have a land use application process. And the state's very aware about some of these restrictions that we have and all the kinks in the hose of how you get housing supply with appeals to LUBA and, folks that don't like to see the landscape changing around them. And so, the governor's office has been working on those and how to kind of facilitate more housing. But, I think we're probably going to be somewhat of a poster child over the next couple of years on how do we grow in this new environment of putting a lot of demand on housing, but having to go through the state land use process at the same time.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to have to, I'm getting the hook from the back. Okay. Thank you to Jordan and to Keith, who's no longer with us right now, but to Steve and to Will and to Geoff and to Eric. This matters.
Thank you, Tammy.
This matters a great deal. And I can share with you that the banter is what goes on behind the scenes, but I think that banter is also what keeps us tightly connected in being able to solve issues together. So thank you for your time this afternoon, and thank you all for being here.
Thanks to Tammy.
Very much.
Thank you. Yep. Linda.
Thank you. I don't know if
Linda,
this is on.
I had one thing I wanted to say, and I wanted to end because this is a really important day for us as a country. Geoff Parnas is the founder of New York Says Thank You, which is a foundation, and his statement was, when Americans lend a hand to one another, nothing is impossible. When we are not about what happened on 9/11, we are about what happened on 9/12. It is up to each of us to continue to honor by not forgetting and by being that hand that is there to support each other. And I think we all heard some opportunities where we can all be going forward together. So Linda, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yes. So again, thank you for all of our city managers for coming today. I also wanted to thank our planning people who planned our forum today, Janet Greger and Aaron Schweitzer. Thank you so very much for planning this. And then also to our staff members, Amber Thatcher, Quinn Rose, and Kim Gammon. They are the ones who are really behind the scenes, much like city staff, who make things happen. So thank you very much for that. And going off on some alternative ways to get involved with City Club or to remain involved, we too listen to you, and we have switched things up a little bit as well. So in October 17th, we are having a forum with Braver Angels. It's back at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, but it's from 4 to 6. And I don't want to give away too much, but it's going to be very interactive and a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. And then in November, we have 2 different forums, one with the Bulletin on their growth series on the 14th, back here at Tetherow in the morning, and then back to our usual time, place, Bat Channel on November 21st, and that is going to be on the future of water. I can't remember which one alluded to that, but that was a member's choice program. Again, we're listening to you. You wanted to hear about water, so we're going to be doing that as well. And then one more thing. Amber wanted me to mention is that City Club 2 is working on elections, so we are in the process of working on our new board of directors, so make sure to look for an email about that information. And just putting on a little plug here, as they were saying, if you want to be involved with your city government, make sure your voice is heard, and you can do that by what? Voting. So please make a difference and vote. Be safe, everyone. Thanks for coming.